My name is Ryder, and at 30 years old I never expected to make the hardest decision of my life regarding my own family. For years I lived with my parents to help them financially while my sister Abigail got the preferential treatment. I gave and gave until the day they announced a luxury vacation to Hawaii, with only enough budget for one child. Guess who wasn't invited? That vacation became the turning point when I finally realized my worth. If you're wondering what happened when they returned to find half their house empty, well, that's where this story begins. Before I dive in, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about finding self-worth when you're taken for granted. Growing up in suburban Ohio with my younger sister Abigail was mostly pleasant. We lived in a modest 4-bedroom house in a neighborhood filled with similar middle-class families. My parents Thomas and Eleanor worked steady jobs. Dad as an accountant at a local firm and Mom as a third-grade teacher at the elementary school, just 3 blocks from our home. On paper, we were the definition of an average American family. Abigail and I shared a typical sibling relationship during our early years. Only 2 years apart in age, we played together in the backyard, fought over the television remote, and occasionally teamed up against our parents when negotiating for later bedtimes or extra dessert. I remember building elaborate blanket forts in the living room and pretending we were exploring uncharted territories. Those simple moments defined my childhood, and I treasured them. Things began to shift when I turned 16. The economic downturn had hit our family harder than my parents let on, and I overheard them arguing about bills one night. The next day, without being asked, I applied for a job at the local grocery store. I still remember the look of relief on my father's face when I brought home my first paycheck and placed it on the kitchen table. "This is to help with groceries," I said. Dad looked at me with a mixture of pride and something else I couldn't quite identify at the time. Perhaps embarrassment that his teenage son felt the need to contribute. "You should keep that for yourself, Ryder," he insisted, pushing the envelope back toward me. "I want to help," I replied, sliding it back. "I'm part of this family too." That became the pattern throughout my high school years. I worked 20 hours a week while maintaining my grades, and a portion of every paycheck went toward household expenses. Meanwhile, Abigail focused exclusively on school and extracurricular activities. I didn't resent this arrangement at first. I was the older sibling after all, and I felt a sense of responsibility. College brought the disparities into sharper focus. I attended the state university, living at home to save money, and working nearly full-time to cover my tuition and expenses. Abigail, however, received financial support from our parents to attend a private college 3 states away. They helped with her housing costs and sent her monthly allowances, things I never received. "Your sister needs more support," Mom explained, when I questioned the difference in treatment. "She's not as independent as you are, Ryder. You've always been our rock." Being labeled the responsible one initially felt like a compliment, but over time I recognized it as the double-edged sword it was. My responsibility became an expectation, while Abigail's dependence was rewarded with additional support. After graduating with my computer science degree, I landed a job at a software development company in our city. The position paid well, and I could have easily afforded my own apartment. However, my parents were struggling with their mortgage payments, and staying home seemed like the logical choice. What began as a temporary arrangement stretched into years. For 8 years, I contributed significantly to household expenses. I paid half the mortgage, covered most utility bills, funded home repairs, and purchased new appliances when old ones failed. The refrigerator, television, couch, all bought with my money. I even helped pay off my parents' credit card debt when it became overwhelming. All the while, I watched Abigail graduate, move back to town, and get her own apartment, partially subsidized by our parents. She worked as a marketing coordinator, a job she often complained was stressful and underpaid. Yet somehow she always had money for weekend trips with friends and expensive clothes. The pattern of favoritism was subtle but consistent. When Abigail needed a new car, Dad co-signed her loan. When I mentioned buying a new vehicle, he suggested I look at something practical and affordable. At family gatherings, relatives would praise Abigail's latest accomplishments, while my steady contributions went unmentioned. "Your sister's just more outgoing," Mom would say when I pointed out the discrepancy. You're more private about your achievements. I swallowed my resentment and continued to help, telling myself that family comes first. I buried myself in work, taking on extra projects and earning promotions. My bank account grew, but so did my sense of being taken for granted. Still, loyalty kept me in place, supporting the family that increasingly seemed to view my contributions as an entitlement rather than a choice. Looking back, I can see all the warning signs of an unhealthy dynamic. But sometimes you need a singular event, a breaking point, to clarify what you've been feeling for years. For me, that moment arrived with the announcement of a Hawaiian vacation. It was a typical Sunday dinner at our house, a tradition I'd maintained despite increasing discomfort with the family dynamic. I'd spent the morning preparing a roast with all the trimmings, another unacknowledged contribution. Abigail arrived last as usual, breezing in with stories about her hectic week and the difficult clients she had to manage. Midway through the meal, Dad cleared his throat with unusual ceremony. "Your mother and I have some exciting news," he announced, reaching for Mom's hand across the table. Their shared smile immediately piqued my interest. "We've been saving for quite some time," Mom continued, "and we finally booked that Hawaiian vacation we've always talked about." My heart lifted. A family vacation would be wonderful. We hadn't traveled together since I was in high school. Maybe this would be a chance to reconnect, to rebuild some of the closeness that had eroded over the years. "That's fantastic," I said, genuinely excited. "When are we going?" The silence that followed lasted only seconds, but felt much longer. Mom and Dad exchanged a look I'd seen many times before, the prelude to disappointment. "Well, honey," Mom began carefully, "we've been able to save enough for 3 tickets. It's quite expensive, especially with the resort we've chosen." Dad jumped in, his tone matter of fact. "We'll be taking Abigail with us. She's been under so much stress lately with her job, and she could really use the break." The implication was clear: I didn't need or deserve the same consideration. I felt the familiar sting of exclusion, but this time, it was more acute, more painful. "I see," I managed to say, keeping my voice steady despite the hurt blooming in my chest. "How long have you been planning this?" "About a year," Dad replied, oblivious to my distress. "We've been putting aside a little each month." A year of planning, and it never occurred to them to include me, or even discuss the possibility. I thought about all the bills I'd paid during that time, the money that had freed up their income for this vacation fund. Abigail at least had the decency to look momentarily uncomfortable. "Rider 1. She started then, trailed off clearly, at a loss for words. But her discomfort was fleeting. Within minutes, she was asking about the resort, the activities they had planned, the restaurants they would try. Her enthusiasm only highlighted my exclusion. "We'll be staying at the Royal Hawaiian," Mom said, pulling up photos on her phone to show Abigail. "It's right on Waikiki Beach." I recognized the name, one of the most expensive resorts on the island. As they scrolled through images of luxury suites and oceanfront dining, I silently calculated how much of my contribution to the household had indirectly funded this trip. "When do we leave?" Abigail asked, now fully engaged in the conversation. Any trace of guilt completely vanished. 3 weeks from Saturday," Dad replied. "We'll be gone for 10 days. 10 days in paradise for them, 10 days alone in the house for me. The house I helped pay for, filled with items I had purchased." After dinner, while Abigail helped Mom with the dishes, a rare occurrence that seemed calculated to curry favor, I approached my father in his study. "Dad, I need to talk to you about this vacation," I began, trying to keep my tone neutral. He looked up from his computer with a hint of impatience. "What about it?" "I'm hurt that you didn't include me in the plans," I said directly. "I've been contributing to this household for years, which has allowed you and Mom financial flexibility. It feels like my contributions aren't valued." Dad leaned back in his chair, the chair I had bought him for Christmas 2 years prior. "Ryder, you're a grown man with a good job. You can afford your own vacation if you want one. Abigail doesn't have the same financial stability you do." "That's by choice," I pointed out. "I've chosen to help the family instead of spending on myself. And we appreciate that, he said dismissively, but this vacation is our decision. We can't afford to take everyone, and Abigail needs this more than you do. Need versus deserve. The distinction was clear in his mind. And apparently I didn't qualify under either category. Besides, he added, turning back to his computer, you'll have the house to yourself for 10 days. Think of it as a staycation. A staycation in the house where I already lived and paid bills. The conversation was over, at least from his perspective, and I left his study with a growing sense of clarity about my position in the family. Later that week, Mom approached me in the kitchen as I prepared my lunch for work. Ryder, I hope you're not too upset about the vacation, she said, her tone conciliatory but not apologetic. I'm not upset, I lied. I'm disappointed that after all these years of helping out, I wasn't even considered. She sighed. You know we love you. It's just that Abigail has been having such a hard time lately. And I haven't, I asked. You don't even know what's going on in my life because no one ever asks. That's not fair, she protested. We ask about your work all the time. You ask if I got a raise or a bonus, I corrected her. That's not the same as asking about my life. The conversation ended like so many others, with no resolution and a tacit expectation that I would continue in my assigned role as the family supporter who required nothing in return. As the vacation approached, the house filled with excited chatter about snorkeling luau's and volcano tours. Abigail was over more frequently, bringing new swimsuits to show Mom and discussing what to pack. No one seemed to notice or care that I had withdrawn from these conversations, responding with monosyllables when directly addressed. The night before their departure, I helped Dad load the luggage into the car for their early morning drive to the airport. He thanked me perfunctorily, as one might thank a bellhop, then returned to his checklist of travel items. Standing in the driveway, watching him fuss over details, I realized something important. This vacation wasn't just a trip. It was a symbol of everything wrong with our family dynamic, and perhaps the opportunity I needed to reevaluate my place within it. The house felt different the moment they left. Quieter, certainly, but also heavy with the weight of my growing resentment. I stood in the kitchen that first morning, coffee in hand, and looked around with new eyes. The stainless steel refrigerator I had purchased 2 years ago when the old one died. The granite countertops I had paid to install when Mom complained about the outdated laminate. The coffee maker in my hand. A high-end model I'd bought for the household. I wandered through the living room, mentally cataloging items. The sectional sofa where we gathered for movie nights. The 65-inch smart TV and sound system. The area rug that pulled the room together. All purchased with my money. All taken for granted. That first day alone, I called in sick to work, something I rarely did, and began a more thorough inventory of my contributions. I pulled out old credit card statements from my filing cabinet, checking purchase dates and amounts. The list grew longer than even I had realized. Major appliances, furniture, electronics, even the new water heater installed last winter. The total value was substantial. Curious about the bigger financial picture, I went to my father's study. I hesitated briefly before opening his filing cabinet, feeling like an intruder, despite my right to understand the household finances I contributed to. Inside, I found folders neatly labeled by year and category. I pulled out the most recent ones and began to piece together the truth. My parents' savings account had grown steadily over the past 5 years, the same period during which I had increased my contributions to household expenses. While I paid the mortgage, utilities, and major repairs, they had been putting away considerable sums. The vacation fund was just one part of it. More disturbing were the transfers to an account I didn't recognize. Following the paper trail, I discovered regular deposits into a separate account in Abigail's name. My parents had been financially supporting my sister all along, helping with her rent, paying off her credit cards, funding her work wardrobe and car maintenance. The revelation shouldn't have surprised me, but seeing it documented in black and white still felt like a physical blow. I sat at my father's desk, surrounded by evidence of years of financial favoritism, and felt something break inside me. Not my heart, my patience, my willingness to accept this treatment. That evening, my phone pinged with a notification. Abigail had posted photos on social media. The family enjoying sunset cocktails on the beach, all smiles in their tropical paradise. The caption read, "Finally getting the vacation we deserve. Thanks, Mom and Dad, for this amazing gift." The vacation we deserve. Not I deserve, we. As if it were a family decision that happened to exclude me. As if my absence were a natural state of affairs rather than a deliberate choice. Later that night, Abigail called. I hesitated before answering, but curiosity won out. "Ryder," she exclaimed when I picked up, "Hawaii is absolutely amazing. You wouldn't believe how beautiful it is here." I listened silently as she described the hotel, the beach, the food, 10 minutes of enthusiastic detailing of their activities before she finally asked, "So how are things at home?" Enlightening, I replied, the word loaded with meaning she couldn't possibly understand. "What do you mean?" she asked, but continued before I could answer. "Oh, Mom wants to talk to you. Hold on." My mother came on the line, her voice bright with rehearsed cheerfulness. "Hi, honey. The house still standing?" "The house is fine," I said flatly. "I'm sure all the things I paid for are working perfectly." A brief silence followed. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," I replied. "Enjoy your vacation." "I need to go." I hung up before she could respond and turned off my phone. I wasn't ready for the conversation that would inevitably follow, not until I had processed what I had learned and decided what to do about it. The next day, I began making lists. First, a comprehensive inventory of everything in the house I had purchased. Next, a list of monthly expenses and my contribution to each. Finally, a list of options for my future. A future I was increasingly certain would not include living in this house. I reached out to Marcus, my closest friend since college, and now a real estate attorney. We met for lunch at a diner far from my usual haunts, where I was unlikely to run into anyone who knew my family. "You should have done this years ago," Marcus said after I explained the situation. "They've been taking advantage of you, plain and simple." I know that now, I admitted. I just kept thinking family should support each other. I didn't realize it was so one-sided. "So, what's your plan?" he asked, pushing his empty plate aside. "I'm moving out," I said, the decision crystallizing as I spoke the words, "and I'm taking everything I paid for with me." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Everything that's going to be quite a moving operation." "I have receipts for all the major purchases," I explained. "Legally, those items belong to me." "You're right about that," he confirmed. "As long as they were purchased with your money and weren't gifts, they're your property. But Ryder, have you considered the relationship fallout? This is going to be nuclear." I nodded slowly. "I've been considering it for the past 3 days. The relationship is already broken. They just don't know it yet. This isn't about revenge. It's about finally valuing myself enough to walk away from people who don't appreciate me." Over the next several days, I methodically planned my exit. I found an apartment across town, a modern 2-bedroom with large windows, and a balcony overlooking a small park. The leasing agent was happy to expedite the paperwork when I offered to pay 3 months' rent in advance. I scheduled utilities, internet installation, and a moving company. I visited the new space several times, measuring rooms and visualizing the furniture I would bring. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of anticipation of building something for myself, rather than maintaining someone else's comfort. Each night I returned to the family home and continued my preparations. I packed personal belongings and boxed up smaller items I had purchased. I took photos of larger pieces for the mover's reference. I made copies of receipts and credit card statements proving my ownership. As the days passed and their return date approached, I felt a strange calm replace my initial anger. This wasn't an impulsive reaction, but a long overdue correction. I was finally establishing boundaries that should have existed all along. On day 8 of their vacation, Abigail called again. This time, her enthusiasm had a forced quality, as if she sensed something amiss in our previous conversation. "We're heading to a traditional luau tonight," she said after a brief greeting. "Dad's excited about the roast pig." "Sounds fun," I replied neutrally. "Ryder, is everything okay? You sound different." For a moment I considered telling her everything, the discoveries I had made, the plans I had formed, but the timing wasn't right. This conversation needed to happen in person after I had established my new living situation. "Everything's fine," I lied. Just busy with work. Well, we'll be home the day after tomorrow, she said. Maybe we can have dinner, and I can show you all the pictures. Maybe I said, knowing it wouldn't happen. Enjoy your luau. That night I wrote a letter explaining my decision. It took several drafts to strike the right tone. Firm but not vindictive. Clear about my reasons without descending into accusation. The final version was 3 pages long, detailing years of unbalanced family dynamics and my need for a fresh start. I placed it on the kitchen counter, where they would find it upon their return. The day before their scheduled return, the movers arrived. I directed them efficiently through the house, pointing out each item on my inventory. The television and sound system from the living room, the sectional sofa and coffee table. The dining set I had purchased last year, the refrigerator, microwave, and small appliances from the kitchen, my bedroom furniture, the patio set, and grill from the backyard. Even the washer and dryer I had replaced when the originals finally gave out. Room by room, the house became emptier. What remained was a shell of what it had been. Functional, but bare missing the comforts I had provided over the years. As the last items were loaded onto the truck, I stood in the living room and took a final look around. The blank spaces where my possessions had been seemed to mirror the emotional void that had developed between me and my family. I locked the door behind me, placed my key on top of the letter on the kitchen counter, and walked away from the home I had helped maintain for 8 years. The sense of liberation was immediate and profound, a weightlifting that I hadn't fully acknowledged until it was gone. That night in my new apartment surrounded by boxes and partially arranged furniture, I turned my phone back on. There were no messages yet. They were still in Hawaii, still unaware of the dramatic change awaiting them. Tomorrow I knew would bring the storm. But for now I enjoyed the quiet satisfaction of finally putting myself first. The revelation about my family's financial dynamics hit me like a thunderbolt, clearing away the fog of obligation I'd been living in. Once the initial shock subsided, I knew I needed a concrete plan. I couldn't just react emotionally. This had to be a calculated decision with every detail considered. The day after discovering my parents' secret financial support of Abigail, I spent my lunch break searching apartment listings. The rental market in our area was competitive, but I had advantages many didn't. Excellent credit, stable income, and the ability to move quickly. By afternoon, I had scheduled viewings for 3 promising locations. The first apartment was in a high-rise downtown, sleek and modern but lacking character. The second was in an older building, with beautiful architectural details but outdated appliances. The third, a relatively new complex across town, felt right the moment I walked in. Large windows flooded the space with natural light. The layout was open and inviting, and the balcony overlooked a small park where people walked dogs and children played. "How soon is this available?" I asked. The leasing agent, a professionally dressed woman named Diane. Immediately, she replied. The previous tenant relocated for work and broke their lease early. We've just finished cleaning and repainting. I'll take it, I said, surprising both of us with my decisiveness. Diane raised her eyebrows. Don't you want to think about it? Compare with other options. I've seen enough, I told her. This feels right. We went to the leasing office where I filled out the application. When Diane mentioned the standard background and credit check would take several days, I made her an offer she couldn't refuse. If you can expedite the process, I'll pay 3 months' rent up front plus the security deposit. 2 hours later, I had the keys to my new apartment and a lease agreement bearing my signature. The swift commitment felt exhilarating. A decisive action after years of passive acceptance. Back at my parents' house, I began making lists. The first was an inventory of everything I had purchased for the home over the years. I went room by room, noting each item and when I had bought it. The kitchen alone yielded an impressive list: refrigerator, microwave, coffee maker, stand mixer, high-end knife set, cookware, and more. The living room contained my television, sound system, gaming console, sectional sofa, coffee table, and area rug. My bedroom furniture was obviously mine, but I had also furnished the guest room when we renovated it 3 years ago. The list grew longer than expected. After 8 years of contributing, I had furnished a significant portion of the house. I estimated the total value of these items exceeded $20,000. tangible evidence of my unrecognized contributions. Next, I needed to document proof of purchase. I spent an entire evening digging through filing cabinets for receipts and reviewing years of credit card statements online. I created a digital folder for each major item containing receipt images and credit card statements showing the charges. For items without receipts, I had email confirmations, or could show the purchases on my credit history. The third list was practical considerations utilities, to set up address changes to file new furniture to purchase for items I couldn't or wouldn't take. I scheduled internet installation, electricity, and water transfers, and arranged for mail forwarding. The fourth list was emotional. What I needed to process before, during, and after this transition. I acknowledged feelings of hurt, anger, betrayal, and guilt. Yes, guilt. Despite being the wronged party, I still felt guilty about the disruption my departure would cause. Recognizing these feelings helped me prepare for the inevitable confrontation that would follow. 3 days into my planning, I called Marcus again. We'd been friends since freshman year of college, and he'd witnessed my family dynamic firsthand over the years. His legal expertise was an added bonus in this situation. I need your professional opinion, I told him over lunch at a diner far from my usual haunts. Can I legally take all these items I purchased for the house? Marcus considered this as he chewed a French fry. Did you explicitly gift these items to your parents? No, I replied. I bought them because they were needed, but there was never any formal "this is a gift" conversation. Then legally, they remain your property, he confirmed. Especially since you have proof of purchase. But Ryder, are you sure you want to do this? It's going to be. Nuclear, I finished for him. You mentioned that before. And yes, I'm sure. This isn't about taking back stuff. It's about finally establishing that my contributions have value. Marcus nodded slowly. I understand. And I support you. Just be prepared for the fallout. Next, I contacted a moving company and scheduled them to arrive the day before my family's return from Hawaii. I was quoted an hourly rate, plus fees for large appliance handling. The total would be substantial, but I had savings. Ironically, I had always been careful with money, despite my generosity toward my family. With the logistics in motion, I began visiting my new apartment regularly, taking measurements and planning furniture placement. I ordered items I would need but didn't already own. A new bed for the second bedroom-bathroom, supplies, kitchen essentials that would remain at my parents' house. I also spent time setting up my new life emotionally and socially. I joined a gym near the new apartment, found a coffee shop that could become my regular spot, and researched local restaurants and shops. This would be more than a change of address. It would be a complete lifestyle reset. 6 days into their vacation, I received a postcard from Hawaii. My mother's handwriting filled the small space with descriptions of beautiful beaches and delicious food. The final line read, "Wish you were here." The irony wasn't lost on me. They could have easily included me if they had wanted to. The postcard found its way into the trash. As the moving date approached, I experienced moments of doubt. Was I overreacting? Would this irreparably damage my relationship with my family? Each time these thoughts surfaced, I reminded myself of the facts I had uncovered. Years of financial favoritism, the vacation exclusion, the secret support of police, Abigail, while expecting me to carry the household burden. No, this wasn't an overreaction. It was a long, overdue correction. The night before the move, I wrote a letter explaining my decision. The first draft was angry, filled with accusations and hurt. I deleted it and started again. The second attempt was too apologetic, undermining the validity of my feelings. The third version struck the right balance, clear about my reasons without being vindictive, firm in my decision, while acknowledging the pain it might cause. For years I wrote, I have contributed financially to this household out of love and a desire to help. Over time, I've realized that my contributions have become expected rather than appreciated. The decision to exclude me from the family vacation while using money freed up by my financial support was the final clarification I needed. I am not valued as an equal member of this family. but as a convenient resource. I explained that I had found my own apartment and taken the items I had purchased. I included a list of these items with purchase dates and amounts, not as a taunt but as documentation. I ended with a request for space, as we all adjusted to this new reality. I don't write this letter out of anger, I concluded, but from a place of newfound self-respect. I hope that in time we can establish a healthier relationship based on mutual respect rather than expectation and obligation. I sealed the letter in an envelope and placed it on the kitchen counter where it would be immediately visible upon their return. Beside it, I left my house key. That night, I barely slept. My mind raced with logistics, imagined confrontations, and second thoughts. But beneath the anxiety lay a current of certainty. This was the right decision, however difficult. As dawn broke on moving day, I was ready to begin my new chapter. The movers arrived at 8 in the morning, right on schedule. 3 burly men in matching blue uniforms pulled up in a large truck, clipboard in hand and ready to work. The foreman, a middle-aged man named Frank, reviewed my inventory list with raised eyebrows. "This is quite a lot of stuff," he commented. "You sure all this is coming from just one house?" "I'm sure," I replied. "I've been contributing to this household for years." Frank didn't ask further questions. He assigned tasks to his team, and they began the methodical process of emptying the house of everything I had purchased. I stood in the living room directing traffic and checking items off my list as they were removed. The 65-inch smart TV came down from the wall, leaving a darker rectangle on the paint behind it. The sound system, with its multiple speakers, was carefully disconnected and packed. The gaming console and collection of games joined them in a padded box. The sectional sofa, a purchase I'd made 2 years ago when Dad complained about the old one hurting his back, required all 3 movers to navigate through the doorway. Room by room, the house transformed. The dining room lost its table and chairs, leaving only the antique hutch that had belonged to my grandmother. The kitchen was stripped of the refrigerator, microwave, coffee maker, stand mixer, high-end knife set, and the complete collection of all-clad cookware I had bought piece by piece. My bedroom was completely emptied. Bed frame, mattress, dresser, nightstands, and the desk where I occasionally worked from home. The guest room lost its furniture, as well items I had purchased when we renovated that space 3 years ago. Even the washer and dryer from the laundry room were disconnected and loaded onto the truck. Outside, the patio furniture and grill I had bought for summer barbecues were added to the growing inventory in the moving truck. The lawnmower and gardening equipment from the garage joined them. The spaces left behind seemed to echo with absence, physical voids that mirrored the emotional emptiness I had felt in this family dynamic. As the movers worked, I experienced a strange mixture of emotions. There was satisfaction in reclaiming what was rightfully mine, but also a profound sadness that it had come to this. Each item represented not just a financial investment, but a gesture of care for my family. Care that had been accepted without reciprocation, or even acknowledgement. Midway through the process, our elderly neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, came over curious about the activity. "Ryder, are your parents moving?" she asked, confusion evident on her face. "No, Mrs. Peterson. I'm moving out," I explained. "These are items I purchased that I'm taking with me." She looked past me at the men carrying out the refrigerator. "Does your mother know about this?" "She will tomorrow," I replied, not elaborating further. Mrs. Peterson gave me a long look before nodding slightly and returning to her house. I knew neighborhood gossip would spread quickly, but by then, I would be established in my new place and my family would have to craft whatever narrative helped them save face. By mid-afternoon, the truck was fully loaded. Frank handed me the final inventory sheet, which I signed after a careful review. "We'll meet you at the new address," he said, climbing into the driver's seat. As the truck pulled away, I stood alone in the driveway for a moment, taking in the house where I had spent most of my life. From the outside, nothing looked different. The true transformation lay within rooms, half-empty spaces stripped of comfort, a physical manifestation of my absence. I went back inside for one final walkthrough. The living room contained only the old armchair my father favored and a small side table. The kitchen counters were bare except for the basic appliances that had come with the house. The dining room held only the hutch, its glass doors reflecting the emptiness around it. In my bedroom, soon to be just a spare room, I had left the curtains and a single lamp. The closet stood open and empty, the marks on the carpet, showing where furniture had once been. I ran my hand along the wall, saying a silent goodbye to the space that had witnessed my growth from child to man. Back in the kitchen, I placed my house key on top of the letter I had written. The finality of that small action hit me harder than expected. This was really happening. I was really leaving. For a brief moment, doubt crept in. Was I being too harsh? Would this destroy any chance of reconciliation? But then I remembered the postcard. Wish you were here. A sentiment, contradicted by their actions. No, this wasn't too harsh. This was necessary. I took one last look around the kitchen, remembering countless family meals prepared on the counters now bare. Then I walked out the front door, locked it behind me, and got into my car without looking back. The drive to my new apartment took 20 minutes, far enough to establish independence, but not so far as to suggest I was fleeing the city altogether. The moving truck was already there when I arrived, the men waiting patiently for my direction. The refrigerator and washer divided by dryer connections are all ready, I told Frank. Let's start with those so we can make sure they're working properly. The next several hours were a flurry of activity as furniture was carried in, appliances installed, and boxes stacked in appropriate rooms. By early evening, the bones of my new home were in place. The refrigerator hummed quietly in the kitchen. The sectional sofa anchored the living room, facing the wall where the TV would soon be mounted. My bed was assembled in the master bedroom, though linens remained packed away. After the movers left, I stood in the center of my new living room, surrounded by boxes and partially arranged furniture. The space felt both strange and right. Unfamiliar, yet undeniably mine. For the first time in years, every item around me was there because I wanted it to be, not because someone else needed or expected it. I ordered pizza for dinner, eating it directly from the box while sitting on my sofa. The simple meal felt celebratory, a first step in a new direction. Afterward, I unpacked enough to make the bedroom functional and set up the bathroom with essentials. The rest could wait until tomorrow. Before bed, I turned my phone back on for the first time since that morning. There were no messages or missed calls. My family was still in Hawaii, still unaware of the dramatic change awaiting them. Tomorrow they would return to a half-empty house and a letter explaining why. Tomorrow, the real fallout would begin. I set my phone to Do Not Disturb, knowing that once they discovered what I had done, the calls and texts would be relentless. I needed space to settle into my decision before engaging with their reactions. That night, in a new bed, in a new apartment, I slept more soundly than I had in years. The weight of obligation had lifted, replaced by the unfamiliar but welcome sensation of having chosen myself for once. Whatever tomorrow brought, I would face it from a position of newfound strength and self-respect. My phone began ringing at 10:32 the next morning. I watched my father's name flash on the screen, but didn't answer. Then my mother called. Then, Abigail. Within an hour, I had 17 missed calls and a stream of text messages ranging from confused to furious. "What have you done?" my father's first text read. "Please call us immediately," from my mother. "Ryder, what the hell? The house is empty," from Abigail. I read each message but responded to none. I had said everything I needed to say in my letter, and now they needed time to process it, just as I had needed time to make this decision. Responding immediately would only lead to heated exchanges where nothing productive could be accomplished. Instead, I focused on setting up my new apartment. I unpacked kitchen items and arranged them in cupboards. I connected the television and sound system in the living room. I placed books on shelves and hung clothes in closets. With each item I positioned, I felt more established in this space, more committed to my new beginning. By evening, the missed calls had reached 36. And the text messages had evolved from shock to anger to bargaining. "This is completely unacceptable behavior," my father wrote. "You had no right to take all these things. Please come home so we can talk about this," from my mother. "We can work this out." "Mom is crying," Abigail reported. "How could you do this to them after everything they've done for you?" That last message nearly broke my resolve. The narrative was already shifting. I was the villain, the ungrateful son who had hurt his loving parents. The familiar guilt began to creep in. but I pushed it back. This was exactly the dynamic I was breaking free from. On the second day, I returned to work. My colleagues noticed my improved mood, but didn't pry when I mentioned I had moved to a new apartment. At lunch, I checked my phone to find a voicemail from my mother. Ryder, her voice wavered. I read your letter 3 times. I don't understand how you could feel this way. We've always loved you. Please call me. We need to talk about bringing back the refrigerator at least. We have nowhere to put the groceries. The practical concern about groceries amid this family crisis struck me as so typically them. Missing the emotional forest for the transactional trees. I deleted the message without responding. By the 3rd day, the communication had slowed but intensified in emotional content. My father sent a lengthy text accusing me of theft and threatening legal action. I forwarded this to Marcus, who responded quickly. He has no case, Marcus assured me. You have proof of purchase for everything you took. Don't engage with threats. That afternoon, Abigail showed up at my workplace. I spotted her in the lobby as I returned from a meeting and briefly considered avoiding her, but decided it was time to face at least one family member directly. How did you find me? I asked as I approached. You haven't changed jobs, she replied, her expression a mixture of anger and hurt. Can we talk, please? We went to a coffee shop across the street, taking seats in a corner booth where our conversation wouldn't be easily overheard. You've destroyed Mom and Dad, she began without preamble. Dad can't sleep and Mom keeps crying. Was that your goal? No, I replied calmly. My goal was to remove myself from a situation where I was being taken for granted. Did you read my letter? Of course I read it. It's ridiculous. No one was taking advantage of you. I took a deep breath. Abigail, I paid half the mortgage and most of the bills for 8 years while living in that house. During that time, Mom and Dad were putting money in a savings account and helping you financially. Then they planned a vacation and deliberately excluded me. How is that not taking advantage? Her face flushed. That's not. They just thought. They thought I didn't deserve the same consideration as you I finished for her. And you agreed with them. That's not fair, she protested. I didn't know about all your financial contributions. Didn't you? I challenged. You never wondered how our parents could afford to help you with rent and buy you a car while also maintaining the house. You never questioned why I stayed home instead of getting my own place despite having a good job. Abigail looked down at her untouched coffee. I guess I didn't think about it, she admitted. It just seemed like the way things were. That's the problem, I said. Everyone got comfortable with me giving and giving while receiving nothing in return. Well, I'm done with that arrangement. So you took everything. The furniture, the appliances, everything. They're sleeping on the floor, Ryder. The old refrigerator is long gone. They had to buy a mini fridge as a temporary solution. For a moment, I felt a pang of guilt. Then I remembered how they had planned their luxury vacation while I paid their bills. I took what I paid for, I said firmly. Nothing more, nothing less. Will you ever come back? She asked, her voice smaller now. To live, no. But I'm not cutting off contact permanently. I just need space to establish my independence, and for all of us to adjust to a new normal. Abigail nodded slowly. I'll tell them you need time. But Ryder, eventually you'll have to talk to them directly. I know, I agreed. When I'm ready. We parted with an awkward hug, neither fully adversaries nor fully reconciled. It was a start, though. The first step toward whatever our relationship would become. Over the next several weeks, I maintained my distance while establishing routines in my new life. I found a local gym, a favorite coffee shop, a grocery store with better produce than the one near my parents' house. I hung artwork on walls and placed plants on windowsills. The apartment became unmistakably mine. A month after my departure, I agreed to meet my parents at a neutral location, a restaurant downtown, where we'd be compelled to maintain civility in public. I arrived early and chose a table near the back, giving myself a clear view of the entrance. They looked older somehow, though it had been only weeks since I'd seen them. My father's posture was stiffer, my mother's smile strained as they approached the table. We exchanged awkward greetings before sitting in uncomfortable silence. "You look well," my mother finally offered. "I am well," I replied honestly. "The new apartment suits me." Along with all our furniture, my father muttered. "Thomas," my mother warned, touching his arm. We agreed to listen. I took a deep breath. I didn't come here to argue about possessions. I came to explain in person what I tried to express in my letter. For years, I contributed financially to the household out of love and a desire to help. Over time, that contribution became expected rather than appreciated. The vacation decision was just the final clarification I needed. "We appreciate everything you've done," my mother insisted. "We've always been grateful." Gratitude isn't just words, I countered. It's recognition and reciprocity. When was the last time either of you asked what I wanted or needed? When was the last time my contributions were acknowledged rather than assumed? My father shifted uncomfortably. "We're your parents. We shouldn't have to constantly thank you for doing what family does. Family supports each other equally," I replied. "That wasn't happening in our house. You were supporting Abigail financially, while expecting me to support all of you." Their surprised expressions confirmed my suspicion that they hadn't realized I knew about their financial arrangement with my sister. "That's different," my father began. "Why?" I interrupted. "Why is it different?" "Because she's younger. Because she's female. Because she's always been the favorite." "Don't be ridiculous," he snapped. "We don't have favorites." "The evidence suggests otherwise," I said calmly. "But I didn't come here to argue about the past. I came to establish parameters for moving forward. I won't be moving back home. I won't be contributing financially anymore. I'm willing to work on our relationship, but only if you can respect my boundaries and acknowledge the inequality that existed." My mother wiped away a tear. "We miss you, Ryder. The house feels empty without you." "It is empty," my father added bitterly. "You took everything." "I took what I paid for," I corrected him. "And the house feels empty because I'm no longer filling the role you assigned me. The reliable contributor who asked for nothing in return." The conversation continued in this vein throughout dinner. Moments of potential understanding, undermined by my father's resentment and my mother's emotional appeals. We reached no resolution that night, but I hadn't expected to. This was merely the opening of a dialogue that would take months, perhaps years, to fully develop. As we parted in the restaurant parking lot, my mother hugged me tightly. "Will you come for Sunday dinner next week?" she asked. "Just dinner, no strings attached." I considered the invitation. "Not next week," I decided. "I need more time. But soon." My father shook my hand formally, his expression still guarded. "We'll be waiting when you're ready," he said, the closest he could come to conciliation at this point. I watched them drive away, feeling a mixture of sadness and relief. The relationship wasn't repaired, but neither was it irreparably broken. We had taken the first difficult step toward whatever would come next. 6 months passed each day, bringing me further into my new life and identity. My apartment had transformed from a collection of transported possessions into a true home. A space that reflected my personality and priorities without compromise. The walls displayed artwork I'd chosen. The bookshelves held volumes that interested me, and the kitchen was arranged exactly as I preferred. For perhaps the first time, I was living entirely on my own terms. My relationship with my family evolved gradually during this period. The initial anger gave way to reluctant acceptance, then to cautious rebuilding. I began attending Sunday dinners once a month, not weekly as before, but enough to maintain connection without falling back into old patterns. The physical transformation of my parents' house was striking on my first visit back. They had replaced some of the furniture I'd taken, though, with simpler, more affordable versions. The new refrigerator was smaller than the one I'd purchased. The television mounted on the living room wall was a modest 42 inches rather than the 65-inch model I'd installed. These visible downgrades served as tangible reminders of my absence and its impact. My father struggled the most with the new dynamic. Accustomed to being the family patriarch whose decisions went unquestioned, he found my independence challenging. During my first few visits, he maintained a distant civility, engaging in small talk but avoiding deeper conversations. His pride had been wounded not just by my departure but by the public nature of it. Neighbors had noticed the moving truck, friends had asked questions, explanations had been necessary. The Wilsons asked about our new decorating style my mother mentioned during one dinner, trying for humor but revealing the social discomfort my actions had caused. "What did you tell them?" I asked, genuinely curious about how they were framing the situation to others. "That you'd moved out and taken your things," she replied simply. "There's no use pretending it didn't happen." This honesty represented progress. In our family, appearances had always mattered, uncomfortable truths, often glossed over with more palatable narratives. That my mother was acknowledging reality, however, awkwardly signaled a willingness to engage with our situation authentically. My relationship with Abigail transformed most significantly. Without our parents as intermediaries, we developed a more direct connection. We met for coffee every couple of weeks, conversations gradually shifting from family dynamics to our individual lives and interests. Removed from the comparative framework that had defined our relationship at home, we discovered genuine points of connection. "I never really knew you," she admitted during one of these meetings. "I saw you as this perfect older brother who had everything figured out. I never considered what it cost you. And I resented you without understanding your perspective," I acknowledged. We were both playing roles assigned to us without questioning them. 3 months after my departure, Abigail surprised me by asking for financial advice. She had accrued credit card debt and wanted to develop a budget. The request represented a significant shift, recognition of my expertise without expectation or entitlement. I helped her create a spreadsheet tracking income and expenses, explaining principles of saving and debt reduction. When she mentioned that our parents had previously helped with her finances, I gently encouraged independence. "You're capable of managing this yourself," I told her, "and there's power in knowing you're standing on your own." 2 weeks later, she called to share that she had declined our parents' offer to pay off her credit card. "I told them I'm following your budget plan," she said, pride evident in her voice. Dad seemed shocked. This small act of independence represented a larger shift in the family dynamic. Abigail was breaking free from her assigned role, just as I had broken from mine. The established patterns were changing, forcing our parents to adjust their expectations and behaviors. My father made his first genuine overture 4 months after my departure. He called on a Tuesday evening, his tone uncharacteristically hesitant. "I'm installing a new water heater," he said after brief pleasantries. "I wondered if you might have some advice on the models you researched when you replaced the old one." The request was significant, an acknowledgement of my knowledge and a subtle admission that my contributions had been valuable. We spent 30 minutes discussing water heater efficiency and installation considerations. The conversation remained focused on the practical matter at hand, but beneath it lay a tentative reaching out an olive branch offered in the only way he knew how. My mother's approach to reconciliation was more direct. She invited me to lunch, just the two of us, at a restaurant we had frequented when I was younger. Over sandwiches and soup, she spoke with unusual candor. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began. "About taking you for granted. I didn't see it then, but I do now. We became comfortable with you handling everything, and we stopped considering what you might need or want." "Thank you for acknowledging that," I replied, genuinely moved by her insight. "The vacation was a mistake," she continued. "We should have either included you or been honest about our reasoning. The way we handled it was thoughtless." "Why did you exclude me?" I asked, the question that had initiated this entire upheaval finally spoken directly. She looked down at her soup, considering. "It wasn't conscious, not really. We had saved enough for 3 people, and it just seemed, I don't know, like you wouldn't mind being left out. You were always so self-sufficient, so willing to put others first. We took advantage of that quality without realizing it." Her answer wasn't entirely satisfying, but it was honest. They hadn't maliciously plotted my exclusion. They had simply followed the established pattern of our relationship, never questioning whether it was fair or sustainable. I'm not angry anymore, I told her. I'm just committed to ensuring that pattern doesn't repeat itself. Your father misses you, she said after a pause. He won't say it, but he does. The house feels different without you. I miss aspects of our family too, I admitted. But I don't regret my decision. I needed to establish boundaries. Will you ever move back? She asked. No, I replied without hesitation. That chapter is closed. But we can write a new one, if we're all willing to approach it differently. By the 6-month mark, we had established a new normal. I visited for dinner twice a month. My father and I had developed a relationship based on mutual respect rather than obligation. My mother had stopped treating me as an extension of the household and begun seeing me as an independent adult with my own priorities. Abigail and I had become genuine friends rather than competitive siblings. The physical reminders of my departure remained. Spaces in the house still looked different. Arrangements had changed. The standard of living had adjusted, but these external transformations reflected a healthier internal reality. My parents now lived within their actual means, rather than the artificially inflated lifestyle my contributions had supported. Abigail was learning financial responsibility and independence, and I was free from the burden of supporting a system that undervalued me. In my new apartment, surrounded by possessions that represented both my past contributions and my current independence, I reflected on the journey of the past 6 months. The pain of exclusion that had triggered my departure had faded, replaced by appreciation for the clarity it had provided. Sometimes it takes a significant rupture to create space for genuine healing. I no longer harbored resentment toward my family. I understood now that we had all been complicit in maintaining an unhealthy dynamic, they by taking advantage of me, by allowing it. Breaking that pattern had required dramatic action, but the result was worth the temporary discomfort. We were all growing into better versions of ourselves, relating from a place of choice rather than obligation. The Hawaiian vacation that had catalyzed this transformation now seemed almost trivial compared to the growth it had ultimately prompted. What had felt like rejection had become the impetus for liberation. What had seemed like an ending had become a beginning. As I prepared for another Sunday dinner with my family, now a choice rather than an obligation, I thought about how far we had come and how far we still had to go. The relationship remained a work in progress, the new boundaries requiring consistent reinforcement, but the foundation had shifted from expectation to appreciation, from assumption to communication. In taking back the physical items I had contributed, I had reclaimed something far more valuable: my agency, my self-respect, my right to equal consideration. And in establishing healthy boundaries, I had paradoxically created the possibility for more authentic connection. The lesson was clear. True family relationships must be built on mutual respect and reciprocity. Giving without limits isn't generosity, it's self-erasure. And accepting without gratitude isn't receiving, it's taking advantage. The balance we were now working to establish wasn't perfect, but it was honest, and that made all the difference. Have you ever experienced a relationship where you felt taken for granted? What boundaries did you set to protect your well-being? Share your story in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video if it resonated with you. Your support helps me continue sharing these life lessons, and I'm grateful for every one of you who takes the time to connect. Until next time, remember that sometimes walking away is the strongest form of self-love you can practice.